Well, brethren, we're here on the Sabbath day, and that in itself marks us out as somewhat different than the world around. We are doing something that the world would consider as rather strange. In fact, a lot of you know that because you've been on the receiving end. I remember when I first began observing the Sabbath, that there were people in the community whose way of expressing it was I had started keeping Saturday for Sunday. That was what they thought. Well, you know, he's sort of gone crazy. He's keeping Saturday for Sunday. Well, back in Exodus chapter 20, part of the Ten Commandments, God's fundamental, basic law, is basic revelation to mankind. In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 8, we read, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall you labor and do all your work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the eternal your God. In it you shall not do any work. You, nor your son, nor your daughter, your manservant, nor your maidservant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger that is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Eternal blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it." Now there are a number of things that we're told packed into this particular commandment. Before we get into the details of that, I want to give you a little bit of background. You know, as we read in the New Testament, we read that Jesus Christ came into conflict with the religious leaders of his day over a variety of subjects, and one of the subjects with which he came into conflict with them concerned the Sabbath. Now, Christ's conflict with the Pharisees and the Sadducees and others of the religious leadership of his day about the Sabbath, his conflict was not over which day is the Sabbath. You know, it wasn't that he was trying to tell them that Sunday is the Sabbath, and they didn't believe that. The conflict wasn't that Christ said that the Sabbath is done away. We read that Jesus, as his custom was, went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. You read that in Luke chapter 4. You can go through the book of Acts and you find over and over and over the Apostle Paul and others who followed Christ's example, who went into the synagogue on the Sabbath. Now, Christ did have a conflict with the religious leaders about the Sabbath. And I'd like to explain to you a little bit why. I want to read you some excerpts from a book that is a Jewish publication entitled The Living Talmud. And it goes through, or The Essential Talmud, rather, is the title of the book. And it goes through and deals with various points of thought from a Jewish standpoint. So there's a chapter on the Sabbath. And it says that the concept of the Sabbath is a fundamental part of Judaism, and its importance is stressed from the story of the creation in the book of Genesis to the explicit precept in the Ten Commandments to refrain from labor on the seventh day. Now, that's fine. We certainly would agree with that. Well, as they come on down, the question is raised. It says, "First and foremost, it is necessary to establish the definition of labor." You shall rest. You shall not do any labor. What does labor mean? Well, going on, says, "First it was necessary to analyze the categories of basic activities carried out during the construction of the tabernacle, and this analysis was summed up in a list of 39 basic labors or acts of creation that were undoubtedly carried out at that time. And these are considered prototypes of the work forbidden and permitted on the Sabbath." So then we get into 39 different categories of work. Then it goes on. Let's find a little further. To state that a certain task is forbidden on the Sabbath is to create a general prohibition specifying what should not be done. It's still necessary to define what marks certain acts as trivial, as an example, writing is forbidden on the Sabbath. Didn't know that. That's one of the 39 types of work. Writing is forbidden on the Sabbath, but what are the significant limits of writing? In this case, the sages decided that 2 letters constituted a significant unit, so that the writing of more than 1 letter should be regarded as work. So if you write one letter, I don't know, maybe you can rest in between letters. And they came up with a whole variety of things. He who destroys a building is not regarded as engaging in work unless the act of destruction is carried out for the purposes of building a new structure that makes use of the destroyed object or replaces it. They got into various controversies in terms of what if you did something and your intent, the intent to work wasn't there. One rabbi held that a man who intended to pick a certain bunch of grapes and picked another bunch instead had not been truly working because he hadn't actually carried out his intent. So he was planning to pick this bunch and accidentally picked the other. Well, they spent hours and hours in matters just such as this. I won't go any further in it, but I want us to sort of set the stage a little bit to realize what it was Jesus Christ was contending with, and the mindset of the people who took exception to him in the way that he kept the Sabbath. The scribes and the Pharisees, who were so incensed about what Jesus did on the Sabbath, were the ones who formulated the writings of the Talmud, who spent their time deciding what are the different categories of work and how many dried figs you can carry without bearing a burden. That's one of them too. We'll come to it where there's a prohibition against bearing burdens. We'll see that in Jeremiah 17 in its context. And they spent great length of time debating on what was a burden. Well, let's start simply with what the Scripture tells us, and I would call your attention. We're going to focus in on three aspects of the commandment given right here in Exodus 20. There are more things that we're told about the Sabbath, specifically three things that we are enjoined to do right here in Exodus 20. And then, in addition, we're told other things. We're told, for instance, that the Sabbath was blessed by God and that it was hallowed. Now, that took place back in Genesis 2. The first thing that we're told in the commandment is remember the Sabbath day. Now, that's a starting point. Remember the Sabbath day. Now, if you are told to remember something, it is an event that occurred at an earlier time. We hearken back, on some event of the past. Sometimes various slogans have been used in times of war or national crisis, in the time of World War II. Remember Pearl Harbor, or during the Texas Revolution, remember the Alamo. A hearkening back to an event that had occurred. People were told to remember this occurrence of the past. So the commandment begins not with the introduction of something new, but a call to remembrance of what had been from the beginning. Genesis chapter 2 verse 1 says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them, and on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made, and God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made." So we're told that God rested, God in so doing blessed and hallowed the seventh day. He set that day apart. Time is created by God. We read that here in Genesis 1. We read that the evening and the morning constituted the first day, the second day coming on down. The days of the week separated here by the setting of the sun, the evening and the morning, this period of time that constituted days based on the cycles that God had set up, the rotation of the earth on its axis, its revolution around the sun, the moon itself rotating, revolving around the earth. All of these things were set up and regulate time. And God set apart a specific unit of time. He hallowed it and he blessed it. So when we're told to remember the Sabbath, certainly we are to hearken back to the fact that the Sabbath is a memorial of creation. The Sabbath is a memorial of creation. It reminds us of creation. It reminds us of the Creator. You really can't be a Sabbath keeper and an evolutionist, can you? Because there's no, if evolution were the case, there's no basis of the Sabbath ever having been hallowed and set apart. Because Exodus 20 doesn't tell you God is doing something new. At that point, it is hearkening back to what we're to remember. So the first aspect of the Sabbath commandment is we're to be conscious of the Sabbath and what it means. It is a memorial of creation. We're told, for instance, in Exodus chapter 31, verse 12, and the Eternal spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak you also unto the children of Israel, saying, Truly, my Sabbaths you shall keep. For it's a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am the Eternal that does sanctify you. The Sabbath identifies the true God. It identifies the God that we serve as the God of creation, the God who formed what we see in 6 days and rested on the seventh. And God set apart that day and hallowed it, sanctified it, set it apart for holy use. That's what sanctify means. And God sets us apart for holy use. We are reminded by keeping the time that God sanctified that we are the people that God has sanctified. That's what it says. It's a sign between me and you throughout your generations that you may know that I am the Eternal that does sanctify you. So we are reminded that we are set apart, that we are sanctified, made different by God, by God's Word, by God's truth. The whole subject of sanctification is an important subject, and one perhaps we can go into at a later time in a more detailed way. But the initial aspect of the Sabbath commandment is we're to be conscious of it. We're to remember the Sabbath. And there are many different things. Let's go back to the Psalms and notice a couple of things very briefly. In Psalm 92. If you notice, right under the word Psalm 92 in most Bibles, you will have a little, in smaller letters, a statement printed, a psalm or song for the Sabbath day. This was a particular title given to Psalm 92. Now, all the Psalms are certainly appropriate for the Sabbath, but here is a psalm specifically designated as for the Sabbath. So obviously there are things that we can learn here. Psalm 92 verse 1, It's a good thing to give thanks unto the Lord and to sing praises unto your name, O Most High. To show forth your loving kindness in the morning and your faithfulness every night upon instruments of 10 strings, on the psaltery, upon the harp with a solemn sound. Now, we open our services with song. We come before God to sing praises to His name, and primarily we sing praises out of the words that God inspired. God inspired the Psalms to be set down and to be the basis by which praise is sung to God. And not that it's wrong to ever use any other song or music, certainly, but and we do. But primarily we sing the Psalms, because that is something that God directly inspired in that regard. So we learn here in connection with the psalm about the Sabbath that one of the things that it's good to do is to have proper music on the Sabbath, music that focuses on giving thanks to God and praising God. And that is to utilize musical instruments to sing praises to God is very good. Now, down in verse 4, For you, O Eternal, have made me glad through your work. I will triumph in the work of your hands. O Lord, how great are your works, and your thoughts are very deep. The brutish man knows not, neither does the fool understand this. Now, the Sabbath is a memorial of God's work. God worked for 6 days and rested on the seventh, hallowed it, sanctified it, set it apart. And so we are reminded of God's work. We're made glad through what God has done. Now notice here, verses 6 and 7. A brutish man knows not, neither does a fool understand this. When the wicked spring as the grass, they just seem to be growing up everywhere. When all of the workers of iniquity do flourish, it is that they shall be destroyed forever. You, Eternal, are most high forevermore. Lo, your enemies, O Eternal, for lo, your enemies shall perish. All the workers of iniquity shall be scattered. But my horn shall you exalt like the horn of a unicorn. I shall be anointed with fresh oil. Now, my eyes shall see my desire on my enemies. My ears shall hear my desire of the wicked that rise up against me. The righteous shall flourish like the palm tree. He shall grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Those that be planted in the house of the Eternal shall flourish in the courts of our God. They shall bring forth fruit in old age. They shall be fat and flourishing, to show that the Eternal is upright. He's my rock. There's no unrighteousness in him. The point is, the Sabbath also reminds us that though the wicked may be springing up like the grass, the workers of iniquity flourishing everywhere, though it may seem that the whole world is filled with people who have absolute, utter disregard for God's way. And sometimes it seems like that. You know, you're just caught in the middle of things. It seems like all these things that are going on, and here are these people. The point is, the Sabbath is a weekly reminder of hope. Just as surely as the sun will set on Friday evening and the Sabbath will begin, that's absolutely predictable. You can count on that the sun is going to go down at the end of the sixth day, and the seventh day will begin. That is exactly how certain it is that the day of God will come. That the time when the whole earth will be at rest, and they will break forth into singing, is brought out in Isaiah 14:7, a prophecy of the millennial time, the time of the Messiah. A time when it says, my horn used in Scripture, symbolic of a government or a king or a kingdom, shall you exalt like the horn of a unicorn. Now, you know, a unicorn has one horn. So here we're talking about one horn, one king, one government, anointed with fresh oil. That's the symbol of the Messiah. The word Messiah is the Hebrew term, Christ is the Greek term, and they both mean the same thing. They mean the anointed one. Looking forward to the time when God's anointed, God's Messiah, will without competition be set up. You see, exalted as the horn of a unicorn, not like the antlers of a deer where you got all kind of prongs sticking out. That's not the symbol. There's not going to be all sorts of competing horns, competing governments. There's going to be the government of God. It will be exalted. It will stand out. You see, as we look around and we see all of the things going on around us, yet what we absolutely know is that God's enemies will perish and the workers of iniquity will be scattered. The Messiah's kingdom will be set up. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. The kingdom of God will be established. The Sabbath is a weekly reminder. So we're told right here in Psalm 92, we are given a weekly reminder of hope. This is particularly a psalm or song for the Sabbath. We're to remember the Sabbath. We're to remember that it is a memorial of creation, and it is a guarantee of a time yet to come when the Creator will set up His government on this earth. A time when, as Isaiah 14:7 says, the whole earth will be at rest. There will be a millennial Sabbath. And so we are to remember the Sabbath. That tells us, that aspect of the commandment is that we are to be deeply aware of the significance of this day. We're to be conscious that it is a sign that identifies God's people. It identifies God as the Creator. It is a sign that harkens back to creation as a memorial and that anticipates the age to come. It is our weekly reminder of the hope that lies within us. Now, you know, it's interesting. We use in everyday language, we use the various names of the days of the week that we see them printed on the calendar. You know, it's Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday or Saturday or Sunday or whatever. Now, you know, you go through and you look at that and you say, now, where did these names come from? Well, they, named after various pagan gods. And you can look at them, and of course they vary in different languages. You know, we use the most of the ones in English hearken to the Germanic or the Norse terms, like Thursday, Thor's Day, coming from Thor, the Germanic god, where if you were to look in French or Spanish, you would see them brought out a little differently. That again, named using more of the Latin terms, where it would be a reference to Mardi or to Mercredi, to the day of Mercury or the day of Mars. The point is, regardless of the various languages, the names that are associated generally go back to the pagan names that were associated. Now, when you look in the Bible, there is a different way of naming the days of the week. We use the term, the first day of the week. This is the way it's generally translated in the New Testament, the first day of the week, or you use the term, the second day of the week, whatever. Technically, if you go back to the way it was said in Hebrew, what they literally said was the first day from the Sabbath. Because actually the term that is used, that's translated week in the New Testament, is a Greek form of the word Sabbath. It was a term that was used among the Greek-speaking Jews, and it referred to using the Sabbath as the basis of counting. And it was a different term than what was used in secular Greek. The point was the days were named by their relationship to the Sabbath. And so the Jews were continually kept in mind because they would speak of a day as being, if they were talking about Sunday, they referred to it as the first day from the Sabbath. Or Monday would be the second day from the Sabbath. Friday would be the sixth day from the Sabbath, or the preparation day. There were 2 days that had their own unique name, rather than just a number from the Sabbath. Those 2 days that had a distinct name were the sixth day of the week, which was named the preparation day, and the seventh day of the week, which was named the Sabbath. And that term Sabbath has to do with the original Hebrew derives from the word for rest. So the seventh day had a name. It was the Sabbath. And the other days were named by their relationship to the Sabbath. That was therefore the focal point of the week. The days were numbered from the Sabbath. But the sixth day had its own name. In addition, it was the preparation day, which is a key. We're going to come back to that a little bit later, because that is something that sometimes is not considered or thought of, and yet is an important part of keeping the Sabbath. So we're told, first and foremost, we're to remember the Sabbath. Secondly, we're told we're to remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Okay, here's another aspect of the commandment. It is, the Sabbath is not only to be remembered, we're not only to be conscious of it, we are to keep it holy. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 1. The Eternal spoke unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them concerning the feasts of the Eternal, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Even these are my feasts. 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work therein, as it is the Sabbath of the Eternal. In all your dwellings. Verse 4 goes on to say, These are the feasts of the Eternal, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons. Now here we find that there is a weekly holy convocation. 6 days work is to be done, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of rest. It is, in addition to being the day of rest, it is a holy convocation. Now the word convocation or convoke, convene, all of these are forms of the same term, and they refer to something that is a commanded assembly, to something that is assembled under authority. We speak of a court convening, or of the legislature convening. That means that they meet under authority, that there are summons that go out, and individuals are summoned to appear. If there's a court, there's summons that are issued from the judge, and certain individuals are summoned to appear in court. Before a legislative session, the governor sends out a summons, a signed legal document that goes to all the members of the legislature, summoning them to appear at a designated time and place.
and they are they assemble under authority. That's the concept. It's not just a casual sort of a come as you are type party. We're sort of having a drop in. Anybody, if you don't have anything else to do, will then sort of drop in. The concept of a convocation is of something that is a formal meeting or convoking, something that is convened, that is assembled by command. So we're told that the Sabbath is a holy convocation. It is a time to assemble before God, because it's not only a convocation in the sense that a court or a legislative meeting may be a convoking, but it is a holy convocation. It is made holy by God. The Scripture uses the term coming before God or appearing before God. And it uses that term in various places. We're familiar, for instance, on the festivals when we're told that we're to come before God on the various festival times. We're told, for instance, in Deuteronomy 16:16, 3 times, 3 seasons in the year, shall all your males appear before the eternal your God in the place which he shall choose. You see, a convocation, a holy convocation, involves appearing before God. And that is a very important concept. As Christ sought to teach the spirit of the law, to expound and to amplify. This is what we are to derive. Christ didn't come along and try to give 39 different categories of things that are prohibited and break each one of those down into dozens of subcategories. He teaches by principles, the spirit of the law. Now, we're to remember the Sabbath, we're to keep it holy. One aspect of keeping it holy is the fact that we are to appear before God on the Sabbath. It is a holy convocation. Back in Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 30, Israel was told, you shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. I am the Eternal. To keep my Sabbaths and to reverence my sanctuary. We are to be conscious that wherever we meet, now it may be down in the basement of the Autumn Leaves, it may be in any number of places as you look at over the years, but when we are assembled there for Sabbath services, we are assembled to appear before God. And for that time, for that brief duration of time, this is the place where God has set His name. And as a matter of respect for God, we conduct ourselves in certain ways. And see, that's the key. It's like as parents, we want to teach our children to observe the Sabbath. And we teach them that the Sabbath is a day apart. It's different. And we show respect for God by taking note of the fact that it's different. It's not the day that we go out and we do the things that we do the rest of the week. It's a day to be kept holy. Now, obviously, for a little child, that is on one level, while for our adults, we relate to it on a different level, but even a little child can learn to set it apart. We're going to Sabbath services, and so, we dress up in our best clothes. Well, why do we do that? Because we're going to appear before God. And we do it as a mark of respect for God. And so we teach our children, and that's it's important not only to do certain things, but to help them understand why we're doing it. Why are we doing things differently today than we would do it, tomorrow or the day after, maybe day after tomorrow when you go to school? It's good that certain things are set apart and that we take note. This is special because it is the Sabbath. And there are different ways of setting it apart. There are activities, as we will see. We'll go on and see a little more about that. But, it says, you shall keep my Sabbaths and reverence my sanctuary. But, you go to a movie theater and they're, selling popcorn and cold drinks. And people, they stop by the lobby and, boy, they load up on popcorn. And, they sit back there and rear back in the seats. They have those nice reclining seats. They sort of rear back and pop popcorn and drink their cold drink and watch the movie. Well, we have, from time to time, we had the video presentation for the sermonette. Of course, sometimes we have video presentation for the Sabbath, or for the whole service. Why don't we set up a popcorn stand back here? Everybody can just sort of go in and out and be popping popcorn, maybe selling a little candy on the side. Well, no, we're wanting to show reverence for God's sanctuary. We're wanting to show respect and honor for God Himself. If you were coming before an important dignitary, someone of high rank and station, people are given instructions. I was impressed a number of years ago. The Pope visited the United States, and I was watching a portion of the televised presentation when he had arrived in Washington, D.C. And they had picked a couple of families to represent the Catholic population of that area, and they were obviously good practicing Catholic families. There was a whole, host of kids that were stair-stepped on down, 8 or 10, and the families were there, and they came up there, and they were presented to the Pope. Now, it was interesting to watch that because you see these little kids ranging from teenagers all the way down to little toddler. And it was obvious that the parents had given great instruction to those children because in their view, in their eyes, they were coming before the Vicar of Christ on earth. I mean, that's what they thought. They were good Catholics, and that's one of his titles, A vicar, you look that up, means in the place of. So here they were, in their mind, coming before the very individual who was in the place of Christ. And obviously they had impressed that because you could look, camera zoomed in. Boy, these little kids, they were really awestruck, and they were all dressed up, and they had obviously been taught how to perform, and they went up there and they were just sort of awestruck at the whole thing, and they went up there and they were presented, and he gave them his blessing and all of this. And it struck me as I watched that they were showing respect to the individual that, in their mind, represented God on earth. Well, we're not coming before an individual or a person that represents God, that is in the place of God. No, Christ is the living head of the church, but we come to appear before God. And if we have that concept, and if we use that concept to teach our children, then it will reflect itself in the way that we conduct ourselves and the things we do and don't do, the things we avoid. We're not at a ball game. We're not. You go to the ball game and they're selling hot dogs or whatever it is. Well, we're not at the ball game. We're not at the movie theater. We are coming before the great God of the universe, and we want to reflect respect and worship and awe of God in everything that we do. The way that we present ourselves, the way that we act, and we teach our children on the basis of their age. A small child may be given something to play with, but it obviously ought to be something that's quiet, something that does not detract from others being able to listen. And I think it's good to look at things that are in some way related to the Sabbath. I know when our children were little, we used to have certain toys, certain things that related to the Sabbath in some way or another that we saved, and these were special. They got to play with those on the Sabbath, and they looked forward to that. And there were things that were used to set apart and make the Sabbath special. When we would have maybe on Friday night, maybe I would tell them a Bible story, or we would go through something. We would have something that way. We would have in conjunction with that, we'd have a special treat on Friday evenings, because something we didn't normally eat desserts all through the week, but we would generally have a dessert on Friday evening. That was something that contributed with small children in something that they anticipated and they looked forward to, some sort of something that helped them to understand this is a special time. This is holy time. This is different than the rest of the week. We conduct ourselves differently. We dress differently. We act differently. We go to a different place. We do different things. It's a different day. It's God's day. It's special time. And that concept that certainly as adults and as the opportunity of teaching it to our children. And we teach it. And as parents, we need to look for ways to do so and to make the Sabbath special in a positive way, not just a matter of a whole long list of things. Well, you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can't do the other. Well, yes, there are things that God tells us not to do, but they're positive things and enjoyable things and things that can make it meaningful. And if you're going to have a Bible study, make it relevant to the children at the ages they are. Whether it's a simple Bible story, there are a number of even Bible games. I remember back when our children were young that from time to time we went, we not only in like a Bible bookstore, but we found even in places like, some of the, remember, I think even a place like Toys R Us or things like that where they would have a set of games. And we found several. All of the games they have aren't necessarily things we would want, but we found things that related very much to the age of the children and were things that they could enjoy and help them learn about the Bible and do so in a way that was related to them. You have to use your creativity and you use the abilities to look for things, whether it's something to color or various things that help children to learn certain things. That I was there, I pastored Lufkin out of Houston, and so every Sabbath morning we would leave early Sabbath morning, and it was a 2-hour drive from Houston to up to Lufkin. And that was the opportunity that I used with the boys. It was a chance to visit with them. And I remember during the course of those 2 years, and they were just about school age. Our oldest son entered first grade in the fall after we had moved there in the summer. But during that period of time, during the course of that 2 years, by the end of that, our younger son would have been in first grade and the older one in third grade. But that was the time when they learned to recite the Ten Commandments. They learned the books of the Bible. We didn't drill all the way up and all the way back, but we would set apart a certain time. We'd spend time talking, and it can be fun. Kids can enjoy learning things like that. And over the course of that time, they gradually picked up and were able to recite off quite a number of different things, learning the holy days, learning the Ten Commandments, learning the books of the Bible, things that can be helpful and enjoyable and can help to train them and to teach them. You have to pick a time limit that's appropriate to their age and how much they can, sort of their attention span. That obviously varies with the age of the child, but we can use the Sabbath as a time for us to gain as adults to have extra time for prayer, extra time for Bible study. We go through the rest of the week and you've got all these concerns and you got to go here and you got to do this and you got to do that. Here's a time that God tells us to keep holy. And certainly one aspect of that is to gain extra prayer, extra Bible study. That doesn't mean that that's the only thing you do. You got to sit in a corner and read the Bible for 24 hours. But it's a time that God has set apart, and it's a time when we can really be able to drink in of God's Word and to study more deeply than we have time for during the rest of the week, because we have other things pressing in, and sometimes it seems like you just get started and then things come up and interfere. Let's notice back in Isaiah 58. Verse 13, if you turn away your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable, and shall honor him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of the Eternal has spoken it. So God says, turn away your foot from the Sabbath. In other words, don't be trampling all over what I have made holy. You remember when Moses was there in the wilderness? Take your shoes off. The ground you're standing on is holy ground. Holy ground. Don't be trampling all over it with your old muddy boots, Moses. You are in the presence of God. So that same analogy is used here. Turn away your foot from the Sabbath. Don't be stomping all over my Sabbath, God says. It's not a day for doing your pleasure. Now some translations render it your business. And the concept includes that, but it includes. Some have said, well, it says do your business. Well, my business is I work down here from 9 to 5, and that's my business, and I don't do my business on the Sabbath. I just go to the ball game instead. You say, well, I'm resting. See, I'm resting on the Sabbath. Well, I guess technically you could rest, lay up in bed all day and watch the cartoons. You say, well, I'm resting. Yeah, but you're not remembering the Sabbath and you're not keeping it holy. See, those are aspects of the commandment as well. It's not a day to pursue our own interests and endeavors. It's not a day for doing your pleasure. That doesn't mean you can't crack a smile on the Sabbath. Oh, God doesn't want it. There's no pleasure. If you enjoy it, don't do it. That's not what He says. He says, call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord honorable. But you see, it's a day to honor Him, not to do your own ways. It's not the day. It's not our day. It's not our day. I remember the story Mr. Armstrong told years ago. He was conducting an evangelistic campaign. I think this was back when he was up in Oregon. And some lady came up to him and said, oh, Mr. Armstrong, I heard something that really disturbed me. I heard that Saturday was your day. And he said, oh, no. He said, you must have heard wrong. He said, Saturday's not my day. He said, Sunday's my day. And so is Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. But Saturday's God's day. Oh, well, that wasn't what she had in mind. You see, the Sabbath is holy to the eternal. So we're to honor Him, not to pursue our thing. It's a day that is to be focused on and directed toward God. That doesn't mean you can't take a little walk in the neighborhood or go and take your kids out to a picnic in the park on a pretty day or something like that. But it's not the day when you would spend the afternoon out there playing ball. You can rest, you can relax, you can you can use it as an opportunity to talk, to visit, to teach your children, to visit with your mate or with friends in the church, to read the Bible. It is a time to be focused on God. And that ought to even reflect itself in what we're talking about. See, it says, doing your own ways, finding your own pleasures, speaking your own words. Now, why does it say speaking our own words? Well, the Scripture says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What we're thinking about is what we're going to talk about. Now, Malachi tells us that those that feared the eternal spoke often one to another, and a book of remembrance was written. God hearkened, and He wrote a book of remembrance. He took note of that. You can read that back in the book of Malachi, where it goes through and discusses that back in Malachi 3, picking it up in verse 13 on down through verse 18, that God takes note of what we're thinking about, what we're talking about. To discuss with one another, to ask someone how their week has been, that's fine. We ought to. We're told, the Scripture tells us to rejoice with those that will rejoice, to mourn with those that mourn, to be able to share with one another the ups and downs, the trials, the difficulties. But we don't want our whole focus of conversation simply to be on secular things. There are opportunities to talk about a whole variety of things, of everything from an article that we've just read, or something we've been studying, or a sermon that's been preached, or events that are happening on the world scene, things that serve to elevate our thinking. We can certainly look at trying to encourage and to bolster one another, to talk about things that God has done for us, or maybe things that we're struggling with that we want others to pray for, to pray with us about. The Sabbath is a day to be centered on God. And that will carry over, and that should be the basis of the different things that we do, whether it's in the context of our family, or if we're single and we're alone, whatever our circumstance. It's a day to be remembered. It's a day to be kept holy. And we're also told it's a day to rest from our labors. And that command basically extends to our household, or those who are there under our authority. The point was that not only was the master of the home to rest, but he wasn't to compel others that were under his authority to go out and work in his behalf or to serve him and to do things. That even the household servants were allowed that as a day of rest. So it was intended to be universal. And it was not simply that the individual who is the owner, the possessor, the master of the house, he rests and everybody else goes around and waits on him and serves him. No, the command was to extend to the household, that the individual was to rest and not to compel those who were a part of his household to go and to do other things. Now, let's look a little further at a couple of other things. Sometimes we hear the statement about the ox in the ditch. Well, Christ used that and talked about in the context of relief of suffering. But notice back in Exodus 34. Here's something to be considered in the context of resting. Refraining from our labors. The same commandment tells us to refrain from our labors on the seventh day, tells us to labor and be productive for 6 days. So that's part of the commandment too. God doesn't say, the commandment is not, well, if 1 day of rest is good, then 7 days of rest will be better. I think I'll just lay around and won't do anything. Well, no. God says we're to be productive. But there is a time that we are to cease from being productive in a secular sense, and we're to concentrate on Him. He tells us in Exodus 34:21, 6 days you shall work, but on the seventh day you shall rest. In earing time and in harvest you shall rest. Now notice he added that in. This was an agricultural society. And, it's easy during the busy seasons of the year to say, well, things are really busy right now. I guess I'll just have to work on the Sabbath. Well, no, he said in earing time and in harvest you shall rest. The point is that if you're out baling, if farmer's out baling hay, he doesn't on Friday afternoon look and say, well, looks like we're maybe going to have rain. I guess I'll have to work on the Sabbath to get this in. What you do is you know that the Sabbath is coming, and so you don't bale more than what you're going to be able to get in on that day. There's a cutoff point. You know that it's coming. That's not an emergency. Earing time and in harvest you shall rest. The statement about the ox in the ditch, that's something, that's an accident, that's an emergency, that's something that comes up that catches you by surprise, something that you didn't anticipate, and there is the loss of life and property is threatened by that. It's going to cause suffering if you don't get the ox out of the ditch and get him in. That's fine. There are things that come up. But if the ox is in the ditch every Sabbath, somebody's got a fence down somewhere. The solution to that problem is you fix the fence. The ox may get out of the fence and get in the ditch, and you find him in there, and oh no, here he is. Well, I got to get him out. That's fine, but then you find where the problem is, and you seek to solve the problem. There are things that come up. The Sabbath, the sixth day is the preparation day, and so we know that we're going to have, let's say, a drive to make on the Sabbath. We've got to come to church. Well, the preparation day is the day you prepare for that. So you gas up the car. That would be the normal thing. That's one way you prepare. You do ahead those things that can be done ahead. That doesn't mean you have to scramble your egg on Friday and leave it sitting there till Saturday morning. That's not what God is talking about. He doesn't give us some long, drawn-out list of complicated rules, but a little bit of common sense applies to it. It's not the day you're going to spend several hours in the kitchen cooking up, and preparing for some a great meal. We're going to have a social Saturday night. Well, I think I'll skip church, stay home, and prepare this, big elaborate meal and come dragging that up here. Well, no, that's not. That's certainly not appropriate. Something may need to be warmed up, to heat something up in the microwave or on the stove, or to open a can, or to do certain minimal things that make something presented. To fry an egg or toast a piece of toast or pour a bowl of cereal is one thing, and to spend a great elaborate time where time that is holy time is being utilized in the pursuit of just secular activities. Now, there's nothing wrong with eating on the Sabbath. It's a festive day, a festive time, and to have an enjoyable meal. But again, most of that, certainly the hard part of it, ought to be done up ahead of time to where it's only the minimal things that have to be done to actually make it presentable at the last minute. It's one thing to wipe off the table after you've eaten. It's another thing to go in and clean your house. There's obviously a difference that comes in, and God doesn't give us a whole long list of do's and don'ts. Well, how many minutes can you spend? Well, I don't know. Maybe some people are faster than others and take some. It's not some great complicated rigmarole, but it's the point that this is holy time. It's set aside for God, and we're physical, and we have to do physical things in terms of eating and drinking and things of this sort, and that's fine. You get together, and you're going to have maybe some brethren over to fellowship with after services or things like that. That's great. And that's a wonderful opportunity to spend some time together and to visit. Let's notice in Jeremiah 17, another statement here. Here's Jeremiah rebuking Judah of old. Verse 19 of Jeremiah 17. Thus says the Eternal unto me, Go and stand in the gate of the children of the people, whereby the kings of Judah come in, and by the which they go out, in all the gates of Jerusalem. And say unto them, Hear you the word of the Lord, you kings of Judah, and all Judah, all the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Verse 21, Thus says the Lord, Take heed to yourselves, and bear no burden on the Sabbath day, nor bring it in by the gates of Jerusalem. Neither carry forth the burden out of your houses on the Sabbath. Neither do you any work, but hallow the Sabbath as I commanded you. Now, the context of burdens here, and you can go back and read it, a similar account in Nehemiah, it had to do with people hauling in agricultural produce. They were bringing in things to sell there. They were coming in and doing their shopping. The Sabbath's not a day for the pursuit of commerce. It's not the day to go to the mall and do your shopping. It's not the day to go load up on your week's supply of groceries. It's not if you're a farmer, it's not the day to bring in your produce and set it up at the farmer's market. It is not the day when we are to be occupied with those things. Now, Christ set an example. We read back in Luke chapter 6. It's the account where he and the disciples were walking through the grain fields on the Sabbath. And we're told that the disciples plucked ears of grain in Luke 6:1 and rubbed them in their hands. And the Pharisees got all upset and said, Why are you doing that which is not lawful on the Sabbath days? Now, why was it not lawful? Well, in their minds, it constituted harvesting. They were breaking one of the 39 categories of work. They were harvesting. Well, that's not what they were doing. They weren't out harvesting the field. They were walking through, they were hungry, and they plucked off something to eat. Christ clearly making the point that this was not a violation of the Sabbath commandment. They were not spending the day working in the field. They were walking from where they had been staying in here, as you put it with the other accounts, they were on their way into Jerusalem, into the temple. And they got something to eat. They walked along the road, and here's the, all these trails out through the grain field. And they reached over, and they were plucking off something, rolling it in their hands, getting the grain off, and chewing the grain. And that was permitted in the law in terms of from the fields to where you couldn't take it and put it in a container. You weren't supposed to haul it home. But if you were walking along, you were free to pluck something that was there by the roadside and to eat it. And they did this on the Sabbath, and Christ pointed it out. The Pharisees missed the point. They missed the whole point of God's law. Christ gave them the example of David eating the showbread. Now, if you go back and read the account, the showbread was the bread of presence. It was the bread put in the temple, and it stayed there for a week, and every Sabbath it was taken out, and fresh was put in. And what was taken out, because it had been in the presence of God, was not to be treated casually or carelessly. It was to be treated with reverence. The priests were to eat it, and they were the only ones, they didn't go out and feed it to the dogs and do things like that, or do other things with it. It had been in the presence of God. It was to be treated with respect. David and those that were with him showed up at the tabernacle. The showbread had been changed, and they were hungry. They didn't have anything to eat. And they asked the priests, "Can we have something to eat?" And they said, "Well, the only thing we have is the only thing we have ready is the showbread, and that's set aside for us." Well, they went on. They talked to them a little bit, and they saw that here David and his men were God's servants, and they were hungry. And so they made a decision. They properly applied the spirit of the law. They said, well, God gives us the showbread. And you're hungry. And we realize that it's going to be more pleasing to God to share this bread with you and let you have something to eat than to stand here, crunching it all down while you're standing there hungry. And so they understood that, and they properly applied that. The Pharisees got so bent out of shape about the technicalities of their rules, and making and manufacturing more and more rules, that they missed the point. And so we want to apply it in a balanced way. Sabbath's not a day to go do your grocery shopping, but some of us come from a wide variety of distance, and some from quite a ways away, and in order to sometimes to get together, it's nice, and I think it's best when we can get together over our homes and like that. But occasionally to go to some place that's quiet where you can have a meal together and be able to visit and to fellowship on the Sabbath is, I think, in keeping with the principle right here in Luke chapter 6. It's not. There's a difference between that and using it as a day for secular entertainment or a day for commercial activity in the sense of engaged in going out and buying all kinds of things and selling and doing this sort of thing. The point is, the Sabbath is a weekly reminder of the God that we serve and the plan that He has. It is a day for special communion, special fellowship with God. That's what the term communion means. It's a time for special fellowship with God. A time for a special sharing and fellowship with God, and therefore with God's people. If God is the center of it, then the basis of our fellowship together is that we are in fellowship with God and with Christ. That's what brought us together, is a focus on God and His way and His truth. The Sabbath's a day of renewal. It's a day of worship. It's a day of rest. It's a day that God and His plan are to be remembered in a special way. It's a day that is holy time, set apart by the Creator. It's a day where we cease from our normal week-in, week-out activity. It's a time that looks forward to what is described in Isaiah 66, when eventually all flesh will come up to worship before the Lord of hosts every Sabbath. From Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh will come up and worship before the King, the Lord of hosts. That's described right at the end of Isaiah 66, and is a time that we're reminded of every time we keep God's Sabbath, a holy time to the Lord.